10 a cold drop hit my face. Then another and another. When I blinked open my eyes, a droplet splashed right into my eyeball. With a gasp, I sat up. My fingers wrapped around the top of my towel, drawing it up with me. I wiped the water off my face. In the darkness, splashed out of sleep, I was disoriented. For a second, I wondered if we'd actually found the river. If we were by a waterfall or something. I couldn't see anything around me, not even my hand in front of my face. Not Alex next to me. Of course, when I realized it was simply raining, I felt like an idiot. The drops were picking up speed. I wrapped my towel around my shoulders and scooted closer to Alex. I wondered if I should wake her, even though there wasn't much we could do other than hope this was a quick passing shower and try to keep our bags dry. So I silently groped for the Ziploc beneath my half of the pillow and shoved my backpack and Alex's tote inside. Lightning flashed, and for a moment, everything was illuminated. I saw the outlines of all the trees and rocks and plants, and the silhouette of Alex's sleeping body next to me. Then the darkness returned, and seconds later, thunder clapped in the distance. You know what is scarier than sitting in the forest in total darkness? Sitting in the forest in total darkness, then suddenly getting a lightning flash to show all the creepy unknown things, or creatures, surrounding you. A glimpse of sharp, gnarled branches pointing like fingers, just long enough for you to remember you're not safe in a shelter somewhere, but totally exposed and totally unaware of your environment, and what else you might be sharing it with. I swear I saw a set of glowing yellow eyes as the darkness returned. Alex, I hissed, nudging what I think was her shoulder but could have been her backside. She mumbled, and then I sensed her adjust to sitting up. What's going? Another flash of lightning interrupted her. Alex's eyes shined wide, scared, in the momentary light. This time, the thunder clapped much more quickly after the flash. Thunderstorm, I said. A cold front moving through brings them. Sometimes, they can be really severe, high winds, hail, flooding, and even tornadoes. Back home in Madison, tornado sirens warn you to get to a basement. And the Channel 27 News weather team even tells you the exact minute the storm cell is going to pass over your street. Out here, alone in the woods, there was no Bob Lindmeier, chief meteorologist, to warn us. What if the forest flooded and we got swept away? What if lightning struck us? Or hit one of the nearby trees, and then it fell onto our tube bed? What if a tornado came barreling through and sucked us up? The raindrops pelting my face mixed with my silent tears. I didn't want Alex to know I was crying, even though I was pretty sure she was also crying. Either that or shivering really violently next to me. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. "See, curl up like during a tornado drill," I stammered. We moved onto our knees and tucked down to kiss the ground, protecting our heads with our arms. It was a position we'd practiced since kindergarten. There was nothing else we could do but wait. The only good thing about summer storms is that they usually move fast. The worst part probably lasted for 10 minutes, but it was a really terrifying worst part. With all the lightning, it felt like being at a rock concert or on an amusement park ride with a strobe effect. You could almost smell the sizzle of the lightning strikes, feel the electricity in the storm clouds. My hair became staticky from the charge. Maybe because there was no roof or walls to dull the sound, the thunder clapped louder than I'd ever heard it. Each time it cracked, Alex screamed next to me and covered her ears. Sometimes I plugged mine too. With every flash of light, I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want to see what was in the darkness surrounding us. I didn't want to see those yellow eyes again. I just wanted to pretend we were safe and dry, up in the cabin's airy, where because the walls are thin, and it's right under the roof, storms can seem pretty intense. But never like this. Eventually, the lightning died down. When thunder sounded, it was a low rumble, far away in the distance. The forest went back to being pitch black, the sky without even a single star. I wished I could look up and see the constellations. There would be comfort in them, knowing that the same stars and shapes visible at the lake and at my house in Madison were there for me to see in the forest. To know that even if we were lost, at least we were still under a familiar sky. But instead it was just darkness, nothingness, nowhere. The cold rain continued to drench us long after the wind and thunder died down. When it finally stopped, Alex and I, exhausted, lay back on the tube, which was wet as a slip and slide. I thought back to the time we'd camped at Echo Valley and our tent flooded, so we'd played in the rain till dawn. Alex and I had managed to make that fun and adventure just by being together. But here in the forest, we curled closer to each other only out of necessity. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing fun about our situation. It was a nightmare. Underneath my soaking wet towel, I shivered and begged for sleep that I didn't think would ever come. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, my everything hurt. I opened my eyes, and even though I couldn't see my reflection, I could tell my lids were thick and puffy, like after I've been crying. The inside of my mouth felt like I had been sucking on those silica packets that come in a new box of shoes to keep out moisture. Not that I have ever tried that, but the extreme, aching dryness is what I imagine that would feel like. The night before seemed like a strange and unreal dream to me, as I lay on the tube, whose plastic was sticky and chilly, and blinked painfully at the bright morning sunlight. After the storm had passed, I'd woken up dozens of times from a noise or the cold. It had been unbelievably cold, bone-chilling cold, teeth-rattling cold, ache-in-your-fingers cold. The thin, wet beach towel had barely helped at all. I had curled myself into a tiny ball, and then I'd wrapped my sweatshirt around my head for warmth and to block my ears. Noise was the most terrifying part of the forest at night. Every time I heard a rustle or the crack of a branch somewhere, I held my breath, wondering what was heading our way. If those yellow eyes I might have seen or might have imagined during the storm belonged to it. Whether it had claws. If it was hungry. I was hungry. As night had dragged on, the sensation both gnawing and hollow in my stomach had been harder to ignore. When I'd tried to fall back asleep after startling awake, my stomach's churn had kept me up. Now, in the early light, I finally felt safe enough to find food. Or safe-ish, because I could at least see anything that approached us. And it wasn't raining. If I weren't so incredibly hungry, I'd lie back down forever, but thinking of the one energy bar left in my backpack gave me the will to sit up. Moving was painful. Slowly, I lifted myself off the tube. My sweatshirt wrap flopped off my head, and the towel unraveled from my upper body. For the first time, I saw my skin. It was horrifying. My arms were covered in bug bite welts, the round lumps so close to one another that it looked like I was made out of bubble wrap instead of skin. Red bubble wrap, because the big bites were super irritated, and despite wearing sunscreen, I'd still managed to get burned. I pulled the towel off my legs and saw that they were just as red and lumpy. Everything itched so badly. I reached my hand down and scratched my calf. Then I couldn't stop scratching, even though my skin turned the color of a maraschino cherry. I had to wrap the towel around myself again so I would stop. Also, because it was just after dawn and still so cold, especially with morning dew coating everything in the forest, including us. Rain puddles were everywhere. We were never going to dry off from that storm. Next to me, Alex's eyes were still shut, although not in the peaceful way she normally looks while sleeping. I've seen Alex snoozing a lot over the years, at sleepovers and in her backyard hammock and on long car rides, like the one to get to the cabin. Her expression was a grimace, her brows knitted together and her eyelids squeezed, like she was in pain or trying very hard to shut out the world or something. Alex doesn't sunburn easily like I do, but her skin was still kind of blotchy and red. The bugs had definitely feasted on her. She'd shrugged her towel up to cover her arms and chest, but below her cover-up, her legs were bare. Welts and scratches coated her calves. Her feet were so swollen that the plastic of her flip-flops pressed down into the tops of her feet, like a cookie cutter into rising dough. Just thinking of her trying to walk through the woods made me wince. I inspected my own feet, still in their tight water shoes. They were puffy too, and my heels were crusted with dried blood. When I wiggled my toes, the fabric rubbed harshly against blisters. Maybe we should have taken off our shoes to sleep. But if we'd needed to run for our lives in the night. Alex, I said, softly at first. Then louder. She made a snuffling noise and moved her head to the other side. I didn't want to take my arm out from underneath the towel, but I needed to get her up. Shivering, I stretched out my hand and lightly tapped on her shoulder. Wake up, I rasped. Don't want to, she mumbled. It's morning. Sunrise was around 6 and sunset at 8. The day would be long, but it might take hours to wend our way out of the forest, especially in our condition. I didn't want to spend another night like this. I didn't know if we could. We need to start walking. I can't move, she said, moaning. Try. I reached for my wadded-up sweatshirt, ignoring the ache in my arms. A mosquito landed near my elbow, then another by my wrist. I slapped at both, gasping at how much the impact stung against my poor, pink flesh. Then I quickly worked the sweatshirt over my head. Protection from the bugs and sun was great, but the fabric, normally so cozy, felt awful against my raw skin, rough like sandpaper. I think there's one bug repel lamp wipe left in my backpack. We'd have to share it, but it would be enough to protect our legs while we were walking. At least for a while. Alex was still lying down, on her back, but now her eyes were open. She blinked up at the sky above the trees. Are you okay? I asked. Do I look okay? She replied. I couldn't tell whether she was being sarcastic or legitimately wanted to know. I scooted closer and peered down at her face. Her eyelids were as puffy as mine felt, and her face looked like she was having a truly awful breakout of acne, but the bumps were bug bites, not pimples. Worrisome, though, were her lips. They were swollen, like the time we were hanging out in the backyard while Mateo and Nolan were playing with a boomerang, and Mateo accidentally tossed it right into Alex's mouth. Even though she'd iced it immediately, her lower lip still swelled up and bruised, and it stayed that way for a couple of days. Beasting lips, her mom had called it. Did you hit your mouth somehow yesterday? I asked, trying to remember if she had. Maybe when we'd first dived into the river she'd bumped it on something. She shook her head. I don't think so. Why? Is my mouth messed up? She brought her fingers to her lips and began gently pressing. I bit down on my own chapped bottom lip, thinking. I didn't want to freak her out. Well, it looks a little swollen, maybe she had bee sting lips, literally. Maybe something bit her mouth while we were sleeping, and now she was having an allergic reaction. That was terrifying to consider. It's not like we had an EpiPen. Alex dove for her tote bag, and after rummaging through it for a few moments, she pulled out a sparkly compact with a mirror. Once she flipped it open and saw her reflection, she shrieked. Oh my God. What's wrong with me? Freaking out wouldn't help us. It's probably just dehydration or sunburn, your legs are kinda pink. Although the redness on her legs appeared more rash-like than a sunburn. Does your throat feel normal? She swallowed hard. Yes. That was reassuring. We really should start walking, I said, even though I couldn't think of anything that sounded worse considering how much my feet hurt, how much the rest of me ached, and how woozy I felt from being cold, sleep-deprived, and hungry. Hungry. I'd been going for the energy bar before I woke up Alex. I unzipped my backpack and pulled it out. It had gotten smushed or had melted at some point, and the bar had flattened into the shape of the wrapper. Oh, food, Alex said, with something in between a sigh and a growl. She moved to her hands and knees to scoot toward me, grimaced, and then sat back, holding out her palm. I gripped the bar in my hands, staring like if I looked hard enough, it might magically multiply. This was the last bit of food we had. Should we eat all of it? We needed energy to walk. But what if we didn't find our way out in the next couple of hours and had to spend another night? We should ration this. Ration it? It's one little bar. That's like what you would eat when food is already being rationed. Yeah, but this one little bar is all the food that's left. I had 3 in my backpack. We ate the other 2 yesterday. After this, nothing. I'm eating half of that. I don't care what the consequences are. She opened and closed her palm. Sighing, I unwrapped the bar. I broke off half, then thought better of it and tore that in half again. I placed her portion in Alex's palm. Start with that. I wrapped up the rest of the mushy bar and squirreled it away in my backpack, because if it stayed out, I didn't think I'd have the willpower not to gobble it up. Alex chewed furiously, then broke into a cough as she swallowed. Water? She croaked. I understood when I tried to swallow the tiny bite I'd been savoring. My throat was so parched, the food wouldn't go down right. I grabbed my water bottle, which felt distressingly light. Either half full or half empty, and considering our situation, half empty was the one that fit. I took a tiny sip, then passed it to Alex. Ration that too, I croaked. She took a long sip and only stopped when I reached to pull the bottle away. Are you okay to leave? She shrugged, then winced at the movement. I guess. I mean, unless we should stay in one place, if that's a better strategy for them to find us? I wasn't sure. Everybody knows that if you're lost, you shouldn't keep walking or you might get more lost. But we were already so deep in the forest, and we didn't have enough supplies to comfortably, or safely, wait where we were. If we were near fresh water and some kind of food source, like blueberry bushes, maybe we could hang out till rescuers got there. But we weren't. We should at least find drinkable water. Otherwise, we're going to get really dehydrated. There was always the rainwater pooled on leaves, if we got desperate. Alex nodded, and I was relieved. It seemed like every other idea or suggestion I had, she'd fight me on. Then let's get moving, she said, rising to her feet. She shoved the plastic dry bag in her tote and the wet magazine too. I rolled up the tube, pausing to inspect the torn spot. The jagged hole really wasn't that big. If only we had something we could patch it with. Leaves? They'd fall off in the water. The one bandage? Too small, and it wasn't the waterproof kind. Pine pitch or some other kind of tree sap? Maybe we could use that to get a big maple leaf to cover it. Are we walking or not? Alex shifted back and forth, wincing every time her weight moved from one foot to the other. The swollen tops of her feet bulged out from the straps of her flip-flops. She slapped at a mosquito, waved away a fly. Then she shivered and tried to hug her cover up tighter, but there wasn't much to hug. Try wearing your towel to keep the bugs away. And to stay warmer. I'd rolled mine around my waist like a skirt. With that and my sweatshirt on, the bugs could only swarm around my head. Fewer to swat, at least. I'd reconsidered using the last bug repellent wipe. The insects were the worst around dusk. I really hoped we'd be found by then, but if we weren't, I needed to save the wipe to get us through the night. Alex draped her towel, which was covered in pine needles and leaf remnants, around her shoulders. I shrugged on my backpack, then tucked the rolled-up tube underneath my arm. The first full step took my breath away because the pain in my blistered heels was so bad. But I gritted my teeth and took another step anyway. And another. I paused for one last look around us, at the spot that had been our home for the night. In daylight, it was pretty, a sun-dappled clearing in the middle of a cathedral of pines, the ground softened by moss and needles. It smelled fresh and clean, like cedar. On any other day, on any normal hike, I'd say it was a perfect spot to linger and drink in the Northwoods atmosphere. Listen to the warblers serenade us. But today, I just wanted to get far, far away. I needed to do one thing before we could go, make some kind of sign. I've absorbed enough movies and TV shows and books about people lost in the wilderness to know that, sometimes, they end up walking in circles over and over. I didn't want that to be us. I had my camera, but I couldn't photograph every landmark we passed. The better thing to do would be to leave something very noticeable behind, like one of our towels. The thing was, we needed pretty much everything we had except the soggy magazine, but I didn't want to harm the forest by leaving human stuff in it. That was like littering, even if it had a purpose. The rules in a preserve or park are simple: carry out what you carry in. If others were looking for us and came across this spot, I wanted them to know that we'd been there. I could do that by making a cairn. What's the holdup? Alex asked, her voice as irritated as it was weary. We should mark that we were here. I'm going to make a cairn. Which is a human-made stack of rocks. Sometimes people use them to mark trails or to show which is the right, or wrong, way to go. Are we trying to lure someone here? She snorted. No, but it might be helpful to mark that we've passed through. Because people are looking for us. Hopefully. Why don't we just spell out help? We're lost in rocks and twigs, then? That wasn't a bad idea, but it would take a lot longer and might be less noticeable to people stomping through the woods, considering how busy the forest floor was. Squirrels and chipmunks could carry our writing away. This is faster. Hand me any rocks you see. I bent down and grabbed a few smooth stones and one that was rough like a geode. When Alex brought me a few more, I sorted them in order of size, then started stacking. It was harder than it had seemed when I'd read about it in some book. The stones, especially the rough ones, didn't fit neatly on top of each other. The mossy ones were slippery. But I managed to make a short, lopsided tower that stretched up almost past my knee. I stepped back to admire my work. I looked at Alex, expectantly. She shrugged. "That's good enough, I guess." "Follow me," I said to Alex. She picked up her tote bag, and then we were off into the forest, with nothing but half an energy bar to fuel us and only hope to guide us.